How's everyone doing on this beautiful, blustery day in Scottsdale? We finally got our rain. Yay. So, welcome everyone. Is anybody excited about today's topic?
Yes.
Intrigued, maybe? Yep, okay, we are. We've got, I think it's going to be a fun conversation about interesting things. So my name's Susan, along with my husband Jake. We run this beautiful show with an amazing team of people that make it happen. And today I'm joined by, right next to me, Seth Fairweather, an amazing, talented sculptor of many forms: glass, metal, bronze, cast glass, and blown glass.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Multiple mediums.
Good enough.
All good stuff. And a highly naturally intelligent, as opposed to artificially intelligent man. And then over to your left is Stuart Yankel, and another amazingly talented, intelligent man of many talents. And I don't know why we sometimes choose topics just to challenge ourselves. I'm going to scoot up a little bit. But we thought it would be fun to do something on artificial intelligence and how it connects and maybe will or will not impact the world of human-formed art. And so we're going to welcome some dialogue with all of you at the end. But just to get it started, I sort of roped Seth into it, but it's because he said something very profound when we were talking about art and artificial intelligence. Do you even remember what you said?
Not really.
I do.
Weeks ago.
I'll share it. So he's up here by duress, but we're going to get some good information out of Seth, I promise. And Stuart, you were sort of fascinated by the topic, and we're going to talk about how it's not necessarily artificial intelligence, but it's also technical tools and things that can accelerate and help artists create their work. We really don't think of it as replacing the artist's hands, but maybe supporting it. And so we got to talking about, well, first of all, how many of you have something like this that might be in your hand or in your pocket? Anyone? Anyone have a device? So do you remember when the technology that is in this phone would have taken up about 50,000 square feet of office space and computers? So all of us are using intelligence created mechanically, digitally. How many of you remember taking photographs with an actual camera with film, and you had to wait to take it to get it developed? And I would always do the 1 hour because I couldn't wait. And you didn't know which pictures had fingers in front of them or if any of them were any good until you got your roll of film developed. And what has that been replaced with? Your phone. And do you remember when Fuji and Kodak were fighting for shelf space while Canon and other cameras with SIM cards were taking over the world of photos? So we want to make sure that we're aware of technology changes and how they can help and impact us instead of replace us. Because we still need to be the photographer behind the camera, right? And we still need to input information. How many of you ever designed a database? Anyone? A database is only as good for you as the information that you put in up front. So that's again, kind of artificial intelligence. We had to teach the computer what things we wanted so it would know how to give us what we wanted when we asked the questions. So all of this is sort of leading up to how do we use all this type of technology in today's world as an artist, and how do we continue to keep our work fresh and exciting? And Stuart, you were kind of intrigued by, and you already use Photoshop in a lot of your composition, and many artists do. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Indeed, yeah.
Hello. Get my microphone intelligence. And just to your point, Susan, the whole idea of human.
We're gonna have a little background noise, ambiance.
There are a lot of little drummers
Natural.
up there. The whole idea of human connection, and the gentleman, Susan, introduced us to a talk by a gentleman that's a friend of hers who was one of the co-authors of Chat GPT, and his whole point about the difference between AI and human intelligence was the interpersonal connection and the human connection, which really is the hallmark of this event. As many of you know, this beautiful woman has been a part of this show for 35 years and created a dynamic cultural institution in town here where we've all had an opportunity to have gorgeous connections with each other and with so many of the collectors in town. A lot of galleries that we work with, we might fly in for a cocktail, and here we have these wonderful experiences getting to know the collectors. I had a gentleman here this evening that I was working on a project, and it was one of the more unusual stories. I'll just throw that out. First, we've been talking about a piece for a couple of, that I've been working on for a few weeks, and I got a call the afternoon I was going to install the painting, and this 72-year-old man rides 50 miles on his bike every week, and his wife called and said, we got some bad news, Chris. His head has some short-term memory loss. He has no idea who you are or what painting you're supposed to bring over tonight. Happily, the next morning he texted me and he said, hey, I'm back. I was in the MRI tube, and whether it was the electromagnetism or what, I was in there and I suddenly said, I want that painting. But that's just kind of par for the course for this event where we have these magnificent stories that we come to tell. But in terms of using Photoshop and the computers in my work, I've been involved with that for probably 25 years. And I put together some images here on the TV to give you all an opportunity to see some of my background process. This is primarily Photoshop, but the interesting thing about Photoshop and AI is that it really comes down to the individual artist's own kind of aesthetic and vision that is going to produce the end game. And so I'm just going to walk you through a series of images, how I might build some of my restaurant compositions that you see here. So I might just take a typical bistro like this. Can everyone see that TV there? And then I'll begin to kind of phase through a variety of weaving images together. And just as I would be painting on screen, I'll be changing lights and compositions and harmonies of colors until I come into a place where I'd like to, delve into a painting like that. And then another example of that would be a commission I had in town here to paint the Sanctuary Resort under Camelback, the restaurant elements of the Sanctuary. So I began here, and then I would again kind of weave through, adding layers of images and abstracting and doing all the things I might do with painting, but kind of getting my initial concept pulled together on screen like that. And then the interesting thing was that I think part of the whole talk here was kind of a competition between AI and human art. And I know in chess they can beat us, but happily I think we're still pretty far ahead of the game. I'm going to show you some images that Chat GPT offered when I was putting in similar constructs of platforms of restaurants with abstract imaging. So they kind of started us off here. And then, I kind of began to talk through various, manipulations of context, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And, I would say, give me a more contemporary dress on the woman, and then, maybe Hispanic bartender, which I tend to feature. And, I think that, there they threw some portraits in on the wall, which was kind of neat, but I think we still have some time there. And then here, this was like a saloon theme that you see. Seth, I'm going to hand this to you as soon as I'm done. I don't want to capitalize on the time here. So this is up at the Buffalo Chip in Cave Creek. I had a painting right here that you see that's kind of the old Western saloon motif. So I would just take, hundreds or if not thousands of images and then start to weave those into a composition like this. And, come out with paintings like these. And then when I threw that over to ChatGPT, they kind of took us back to the full cheese. And
I think you're safe.
yeah. And then there was this bull riding theme here as well. I'll take you through some of the images that I began to weave together there. And eventually, I came onto a painting like this, and I have several others, larger ones in my exhibit here as well. And then, the interesting thing about this theme is that going back in history, these white bulls have been painted for, this is back in the Greek period, early Greek period, and even back in the very early cave painting period, we see these white bulls that have been celebrated in art some 18,000 years ago. And then ChatGPT kind of threw their stuff at us like this. And this was probably the deciding factor in, I'll draw this to an end here. I had a commission last year to do a painting for a gentleman who wanted Baryshnikov at the Bolshoi Ballet in Moscow. So I just began to pull together images of the theater and some dancers and maybe some background dancers. And then I came up with an image like this. And then I asked ChatGPT to do this one, and they kind of hit this one out of the park. So, yeah, that was probably the low bar. So then I said, let's get rid of that tutu. And they kind of came back with that. And then it kept getting better, and finally I told them to put it on the ground, and so they came off of that. So again, I think we might be out front for a good while.
And no offense to ChatGPT, but it's not there yet as far as creating the emotional connection, I think, in art. And it is only as good as the information you feed into it. How many of you used that before? A few of you? Yeah, it's good. It's good to maybe get your brain started, but I think the other thing is we need to remember how to learn. And art is not about perfection, it's about connection. And the statement that you made was when you were studying for your MFA, when all the abstract contemporary was all the rage. And don't forget about the human touch.
Don't forget what? Okay. So when I was in grad school, what was very in vogue, what was very kind of the focal direction of contemporary sculpture was a DIY aesthetic, and people wanted to make things that were more concept driven, but that were accessible to the viewer by not having a sense of mastery to it. There was a lot of 2x4s wrapped in pipe cleaners and glitter, and it was terrible. But there was a reason for it. It just wasn't a good one. And what I saw in the years following that was a kind of a reaction to how stupid that was, and that craftsmanship and mastery really became a more valuable aspect of art making for a lot of collectors, for a lot of people that just appreciated art, that the DIY aesthetic didn't last very long. But I'm also the child of a computer scientist, and while we all sit back and laugh at what ChatGPT is generating, I think machine learning is something that you can't disregard the speed at which a computer can learn things like composition and form and color. And in 5 years, ChatGPT is going to be making good stuff, not gentlemen leaping around in tutus that are fun today. They're going to be making images that are serious competition. And so I think that it's important to think about what sets a person's work apart from machines. That's the bigger question. I don't know. I don't even know where I land on this topic. It's too broad. It's because then we start getting into the philosophy of it. If we're all capable of making art, but 98% of the population is never going to try to, but an artificial intelligence does try to, why are we better? Why is our attempt more important or more valid than a program trying to do the same thing and trying to learn and get better? And I don't know. It's a really complicated. It's not something you can just dismiss or just say, machines don't matter, because they do. And artists are using them constantly now in their work. I don't use AI image generation, but I use 3D scanning. I use 3D printing to make things bigger or smaller. For rapid prototyping, I use 3D printing to make things to cast in bronze that I can blow glass into. It's an incorporation of my hand into what is possible through technology. But in 5 or 10 years, I don't know what that's going to mean. If we're all used to the idea of technology influence what we're doing, where do we draw the line? And I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you. I have some thoughts, of course. And yes, I'm glad you brought up the 3D printing, because that's one thing that has been used a lot in specifically three-dimensional. I was speaking with Bryce, who was going to be on the panel, but then he remembered he had a conference call regarding a monument he's doing for Bend, Oregon. But he was showing me he will sculpt at scale, normal size. For instance, he had an eagle that he sculpted in a maquette, and then was able to 3D scan and then point it up in the computer to do larger than life size, and also do the same thing. I don't know if any of you remember or have seen Bryce's work with the little bees. He had a series of wood boxes with bees. That bee was sculpted about the size of my hand to begin with, and then scanned and pointed down to make little teeny tiny bees, because he literally said, I barely could get my fingers to sculpt such a small piece. So it's still Bryce's artistic vision and composition, and then it's easy to scale up or down. So I think for me, how does it fit in? I think it's a matter of, using the tools that are available through technology, but still express the human emotion that can come only from the artist's heart. I do think that I keep saying it backwards, GPT and others, I'll get to you, but you're gonna have to come up here. Yeah, I'm serious. It will continue to evolve, and rapidly so. I mean, everything is happening exponentially fast now compared to what it did before. But as we find more opportunities to apply this, and again, with anything in life, it can be used for good or evil, right? No matter what. Some people use their phones to create beautiful imagery. Some people use them to show us the worst of the worst. But I think we can do, by the questions we ask and the learn language aspect of chat and other platforms, it will continually learn and get better. And the example that Zach Cass gave at that talk was how there's many things that machines can do better than humans. And the number one thing he cited was autonomous vehicles. And autonomous vehicles are far safer because they don't have one factor, which is the human driving it. So 50,000 people die every year in America in vehicle crashes, and that's mostly from driver error. But we have a huge ability to forgive human error. But if one Tesla runs over somebody, like happened in Tempe a couple years ago, we have zero tolerance. But what happens is the Tesla or the Waymo can learn from that mistake to not do that same mistake again. It might make others, but each time it iterates, it will learn and get better. And there will be many things that will happen with that can replace and allow us to have more time. What it can't do, though, is replace the experience of the human connection. And since so much of the art that we see go through here is based on that, I think there will be a category for digital art or AI art in the future, but I feel like it will be more of a category than replacing all the fine art that we see here today. I do believe 3D printing will continue. Todd, are you going to come up here? John Todd Paxton, everyone, with some thoughts.
Just a quick thought about tools and what we use them for. Years ago, people go, oh, Michelangelo, he just chiseled in until he found the sculpture in the stone, and that is, he wrote that in his autobiography, and that's baloney. He used a punto macanato, which is basically a machine that he made a small sculpture, still skillful there, but then it pointed up, in other words, grew in size, found the points in space, and made those points where he chiseled to. It's still used today. It is an effective tool. It works so well that you can get a beautiful sculpture in stone from something that you sculpted in clay. We use the same things. Tools will always, if it has the human involved, make things beautiful and better and easier. But we romanticize things. We go, what is it like? Well, Michelangelo, I just want him to just chisel in and find Moses in the stone, and but the reality is much more pragmatic and effective for Michelangelo. He produced a lot of art that changed the world at that time, and we still are thinking about Michelangelo at this time as one of the greatest artisans of all times. Well, what will we see today? The pragmatic has to be there, or you don't get the romantic. How you feel about it, in the end, is how much you want to dive in and get to the nitty-gritty. I tell people all the time, how do you get from clay to a bronze? It's an amazing process, but it has nothing to do with what is the art. And if you're thinking about the art, that comes from your brain and what you want it to be. AI is the worst it will ever be. And at some point, sometime soon, you won't be able to tell the difference. It's going to be up to you to figure out, are you okay with the romantic? Just, oh, it's beautiful, this guy did it. There's a guy that I follow, and I don't follow him anymore, because I just can't. But he uses AI, he puts in the prompts, and his paintings are stunning. They make me feel. And I don't know how to feel about that because he didn't do it. A computer did it. And that's fascinating and weird. And I don't know how to feel about it, but we're all going to have to wrestle with those, what we accept, what we don't accept. For me, it will always have human attached to it, or it's not going to be truly beautiful.
Well, you had the same thing with Vermeer. There was all these discussions about whether he used the camera obscura, which was kind of a way of enlarging the lines of his subject that was projected onto the canvas. But I always tell people that you could enlarge the outlines of a painting or a subject, and then you give that to 100,000 artists, and you're only going to have one Vermeer. So. I think Todd's exactly right that the tools, have been used for centuries, to help artists, be more productive. But like Seth said, I think the real question is what will set apart humans from AI in our future. And there's something about the innate wisdom and emotional intelligence in human beings that has. I mean, obviously we saw that AI has some humor with Baryshnikov, but for the most part, the passion, the wisdom. I mean, wisdom is essentially, quality, not quantity. And, the life experiences that human beings share. And then additionally, like we come upon the subject of abstraction. And you've all seen these little CAPTCHA where they twist the letters so that bots don't take over your computer. Only humans are able to read certain types of abstraction. And I mean, I think that is also another key element that's going to keep artists alive for a great many decades, because while AI is just this extraordinarily profound tool of quantitative information and intelligence, human beings, are able to understand and read patterns. I mean, even Da Vinci 500 years ago had said that simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication. And, we saw in the 20th century in so many different fields where we kind of cracked open Newtonian physics to Einstein. We have the conscious and the subconscious in psychology. So many fields, in music and art, the abstraction and improvisation that exploded in the 20th century just sort of reveal the human heart behind what really underpins, so much of our value. And so, yeah, I think that's a great point. One other point to Todd's example of scaling up. My wife and I had an unusual opportunity to purchase an historic property some years ago. That was a stone studio back in Connecticut. It was built by Gutzon Borglum, and he was another example of an artist that used tools to scale up his work. And before he did Rushmore, he went down to Georgia to do the Stone Mountain, and they said to him, we'd like you to do like a 20-foot Robert E. Lee on the side of this mountain. He said, actually, I'm going to do 70 figures and 80 horses. And they said, oh, you want the whole mountain? He said, yeah, I want the sky too. But at that point, he had no idea how he was going to do the project. So he called Eastman of Eastman Kodak, said, I need the largest slide projector that you ever thought of building in your life. He built a studio a mile from the face of the mountain, did his drawing on the glass window of the studio, projected it, and had guys hanging off the mountain with buckets of black paint in the evening. And so, that idea of scaling up and using computers as a tool is just invaluable for artists. And yet, the human element, I think, is just going to, shine on like a star for a great many years. So.
Yeah, and again, using it as a tool, there's a brand new World War I memorial in Washington, D.C. I should have brought that article out with me, but I'm happy to share it with anybody. Done by Sabin Howard. Howard Sabin. I am humanly intelligent most of the time, but not always. Sabin Howard. And it was a project years and years and years in the making. First of all, getting the idea sold, and he had multiple committees, and from the World War I committee to the Parks Commission to the funding and all this that he had to present his idea to, and a lot of people were not grasping it. So he, at one point, raised $500,000 of his own money and went to New Zealand to work with a three-dimensional firm down there that did a lot of the movie casting things. And he was able to solve some of his composition challenges, including it was going to be just a bas relief, and he decided in working with them that he wanted actual humans coming forward and not all against the wall. But he was able to come back with a 6 foot scale of, or 6 foot tall scale of what he wanted to accomplish. And that's when he finally won over all the different various committees, because they couldn't visualize it until he was able to provide them a 3D printed version of his vision. And that's great to be able to use technology to bring a big project to fruition. So it'd be worth a trip to DC to see that. But one other thing you said to me when we were talking is that the more, what I said about we don't crave perfection, we crave connection. And you talked about that is, if AI can produce a perfect thing, we may as human beings start to look for maybe the flaw or the fingerprint or the tribal rugs that are made. There's always one mistake made on purpose so that people will know it's been made by hand. So talk a little bit about the value of imperfection.
It's on page 3 of work. Oh, really?
People are looking at your work.
Oh.
Yeah, I made that.
Amen.
There you go. I think we're done. No, I think that it's natural for, I think something that does set people apart is their tendency to buck authority and to go against what's popular. Manet started painting with a palette knife when it was super cool to not even see brushstrokes. The abstract expressionists started just throwing paint around when realism was all the rage. And then the minimalists kind of went against that. And there's this endless cycle of art reinventing itself to fly in the face of what is the standard practice at the time. And so I think that as we get more and more used to the kind of artificial smoothness you see in AI images, we're going to start being drawn to things that do have flaws, that we're going to be able to tell, oh, a person did do that. And this is something that a machine would struggle to recreate a mistake like this. I heard an artist once say that the biggest problem that people have when they're trying to learn how to be artists is they're trying to eliminate their mistakes. But mistakes are what are your style. Your mistakes are the way that your work manifests itself. Your imperfections are what set it apart from everything else. If you had no mistakes, it would just be flat and overly perfected. I probably made that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not perfect.
So your parents were a medical doctor and a computer scientist?
No.
No. What was the other? Tell us the story. You were going to be a surgeon.
My maternal grandfather was a pediatrician, and there was a lot of doctors through his side of the family. And then my dad's sister wrote the book on emergency pediatric care, ER care for children. So there was always a lot of medical stuff going on. And then my dad was a computer scientist. He had got his PhD in psycholinguistics, and then was invited to join a computer science department when computers were just starting out. So we grew up kind of exposed to computer learning and always kind of seeing what computers can be used for more so than Minesweeper. And so I was going to be a doctor, I was going to be a surgeon, and then I took glassblowing to get my art requirement out of the way, and that was a lot more fun than cutting faces, so I kept with that. in retrospect, I should have cut the faces.
We need you.
What you do is awesome. It's the best.
That's pretty crazy. I have a similar experience. My father's a biochemist, and I was kind of typical suburban kid, very strong in science and math, and I thought I would be a surgeon, maybe combining my interest in art and growing up around a lot of art with science to do reconstructive surgery. And then when I had an opportunity to take classes at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in Philadelphia, I kind of switched full-time to that and had all the aunts screaming at me at Thanksgiving dinners. But down there, I kind of grew up around a lot of contemporary 19th, 20th century art, and then really got exposed to everything from the Greeks, on through all the great European, Dutch, Italian, Spanish painters, and threw all the eggs in that basket, and one thing led to another. I always tell people that it's probably the best time in history to be an artist in this country because of the real estate boom and the economy the last 75 years have just made the arts blossom and thrive. And we happen to be in the presence of an exhibit that's put forward with so much passion that it's allowed so many artists here to really build their careers. But the other point I was going to make was, a big part of fine art, I think, that sets apart the digital and the AI is the whole physical process that is involved. I tend to use very large brushes in my work, and the night guard coined me Chief Longbrush some years ago, and that kind of stuck. But I kind of like the idea of people say, why use these long brushes, and I kind of use the golf analogy. You're not going to get much of a golf game with a bunch of putters, so you sort of need large tools to get into the game, and just the physicality of the materials that we use. I know Seth is standing pretty close to the sun with his work. He's busting out hundreds of thousands of degrees of temperature while he's in process. I actually have a couple of process shots here on the TV I can show you. This is me painting a 7-foot canvas at night in the city, and this is what I look like on 20 cups of coffee here. This drives Todd crazy because he sees my rapid speed. I think he left.
So your aunts first scream at you. What did your family think when you pivoted and decided to be an artist? Did they think you were crazy?
No, they didn't really care. They were like, they wanted all of us to just do what we enjoyed doing. My dad's mom was an art dealer in Chicago, first female art dealer in the city, and my mom's family, a lot of professional musicians, and there was a prima ballerina in there somewhere. Like, the arts were not unheard of, and so when they were kind of just like, yeah, sure, we'll see what happens. And then once they saw me blowing glass and how into it I was, they said, oh, all right, sure, we'll back this.
And what do you like most about what you do? Because you do a lot of different things, and you must lie awake at night and think crazy ideas up. What do you like most?
Like what medium, or? I think what I like most is figuring out how to make an idea come to life. I like the problem solving. I like the building it from the ground up and discovering how to make it a reality, whether that be in glass or metal or some other mixed media. What I really enjoy is the problem solving and then seeing this vague notion that I had in physical space when I'm done.
Okay, as a collector, that's why I want to buy art from a human. Anybody agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Human intelligence, problem solving, creating something beautiful, and being smart enough to use the tools you need to help you do that. But that's brilliant. I love Seth because he acts like he's a curmudgeon, but he's a softie. Yeah, he is. Do we have questions? Yep.
I just have a comment, and to figure this out.
Yeah, this.
Figure that out. I mean,
Do you know?
I can't see it. Oh, that thing.
Here, talk about that. How many pieces?
I made that too.
How many things did you break making that?
How many did I break? 2, maybe. I know I broke one taking it apart. I don't break a lot of glass making it anymore. That was, I think, 180 pieces in there. So I usually make about 200, so I have some spares in the right color. And then Caleb yelled at me right when I was taking one out, and I broke it. So
It's Caleb's.
it's always Caleb's fault. Remember that.
Talk about your food.
I made another one that looks like it goes on forever.
that's with the glass, with the mirror. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a mirror. There's 2 mirrors.
Oh.
I mean, I could explain it, but it didn't really do a lot of good. You should go see it.
Yes.
Look at it. If anybody doesn't look at that piece at this show, you have missed the best piece in the whole entire show.
Exactly.
Just described. It's right back there.
You won't be allowed to come back if you don't go look at it.
It's so amazing.
You will be allowed. It's fine.
It's the greatest piece.
And I will say that we did a recent interview, which is on our YouTube page and our webpage with Seth, and we walked around and talked about his art. Do you have any good photos of it? Or you're going to go back and look at it.
Yeah.
It's in the far corner.
I had a question about that because you described that what kind of prompted you to make it was remembering as a child you would sit on the bathroom countertop and play with the mirrors in there, and that taps into something that's a very human experience. Do you think, I mean, any of you guys up there, do you think that AI or machine can ever tap it? I mean, what prompted that was a human experience. And will technology ever be able to do something like that?
Wait, before we do, how many of you did that with the medicine cabinet? Anyone? Do you know what I'm talking about? And to see how many of yourselves you can see?
I think that right now artificial intelligence isn't real. It's not a real intelligence. It's a computer program that is spitting out stuff based on your prompts. I think that in however many decades it takes to really pass the Turing test and really create an artificial intelligence that really thinks, that's going to create some very interesting questions and potentially artwork as this intelligence is trying to work through its own lack of humanity and wondering about the human experience. I think that right now, what really sets humanity apart is that we can draw from these emotional places. We can pull from experiences or memories that have an emotional content that can't be broken down to data. But in 20 years, 30 years, when this artificial intelligence has those same questions and has those same curiosities, I don't know what's going to happen.
Wow.
You know, I did a anatomical dissection like a lot of great artists had done through time to learn anatomy and form, and for me it was a pretty religious experience to see this body. That you just came to realize that the life that's been blown into this flesh and bone is just of an infinite level of genius, and I think in a lot of ways we underestimate the deeper strengths of the human being, and a lot of people seem to have a concern that AI is going to overtake us in so many ways, and obviously quantitatively there's just like extraordinary potential, but I think at the end of the day human beings possess a soul and a vision and a heart that will be somewhat unparalleled. And I have to wonder if you have to be fluent in the like as artists, we can see art and it's much easier to discern the level of input. If AI writes a book, I think as a novelist you can probably pick it off quite easily. I think there's some degree of competency and fluency in that language. But that being said, I think that like Susan said, we all hold in our pockets access to tens of thousands of years of influences. And it used to be you might get an opportunity to go to Florence once to see a Da Vinci, but now we have access to inputs of all of the great arts throughout time, and I think that's kind of the role of us as artists, is to pay homage to so much of the wisdom of the past, and yet to kind of through our own hours invested to find something that's unique to our own voice. And people always ask us, how do you know when a painting is done? And I tend to bring up Tolstoy and tell them it's more like War and Peace. It's much more of a battle than most people realize. And at the end of the day, I think humans end up with an aesthetic that's built upon such a rich and vast diversity that I think in a lot of ways art will hold its own for a great many years. So
Yeah. Again, I'm the eternal optimist. I do believe everything will have its place, and I think that we'll have the category of augmented or artificial or digital. But I think the thing, kind of going back to this gentleman, Zach, he teaches at UVA. He's a futurist, but he mostly calls himself a humanist. So the man who's behind one of the most technologically advanced things of our time always goes back to the humanity. And what will we do with the time we have with all of the tasks that might be replaced by machines? It's all about connectivity, time with friends, family, and a community that means something will become more and more important. And he actually talks about, he thinks we should never have given children smartphones, and we should not allow children to be on social media until they're at least 18 years old. We've given a most addictive tool to our kids, and then we've said, but why don't you go play outside? But they're already addicted to the tool. So I think what makes humanity wonderful is being curious, discovering, experiencing life in real form, and again, being able to use the tools to support our lifestyle or to learn from or evolve. And we will continue, as Seth, the more, it's a learned language protocol, so the more information the tools receive, the more and better their output will be as we go through time. But we should never undervalue the ability to use our humanity to connect and learn from others and to engage and stay curious and keep that connection, the human connection going. And we do much of that through viewing beautiful things and works of art. We talked about that last week in the well-being session, and I didn't really mean to have them one fall right after the other, but it is kind of interesting because I think so much of our mental health and well-being is not related to what tools and technologies can do for us, but what we can do for each other and how we stay together as a community. So would be really interested in hearing if there's other questions or thoughts. Yes.
I had no intention to speak tonight, but there are two programs I look forward to every week, or not programs, but conversations. One is this event every Friday night, which is really extraordinary. I hope people who aren't here tune in and tune into the archives. The other is a conversation I have weekly with my former graduate school professor, who's now 83 years old. And he has a conversation every Wednesday, I usually call him on Thursday, with a Holocaust survivor. And he told me about a recent conversation he had with him about AI. And he said that his friend Lou is convinced that AI is smarter than human beings. And my very erudite college professor, much smarter than me, argues that no. He says everything that AI knows was programmed into it, as one of you said. And so it only knows what it can retrieve, and it can retrieve everything instantaneously. But that's all it knows. And I'm a little bit, I don't know exactly where I fit on this. And in art, I remember that there was a discussion at the Legacy Gallery downtown that featured 10 of the probably most preeminent Western artists of our day. I mean, there was, Anton and Greeley and all of those guys. And they discussed this as well, because they weren't really necessarily talking about AI, because this was a couple of years ago, but they were talking about artificial projection and how it influenced. And they all said, we can tell instantaneously, when one was created through this artificial program than through emotional intelligence. And I have to agree with Seth. I think that gap is really closing. It really is closing. And so I don't think I could distinguish between an AI-produced piece, as in literature, we were talking about this earlier, and a piece that is created by human emotion. But there's going to be this little bit of difference. This little bit of difference that I think even the unsophisticated eye can find. And that's what we'd be looking for. Because I think that's the real difference. And I think I agree with you, that decades from now, you'll still be able to distinguish what came out of human intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence.
Todd, if you want to talk, come back up here again. You're too far away. That brings me to another funny story. When the Otis elevator first came up with you can come up. The first elevator that was safe for humans to ride because it had the fail-safe ability to catch it. Well, they finally started selling it to buildings, and people wouldn't get on it because they didn't know if it was safe or not, because no one had, really been riding elevators unless they were going down shafts. So about 6 months later, these buildings wanted to sell the elevators back, and Otis Elevators was like, no, but let's find out why people aren't using it. And they were afraid of it. And so they put mirrors in the back so people would see their reflection, and they started playing music, make it more comfortable. It still didn't quite work until they finally put elevator operators on there so that it had the human touch, so that people felt safe enough to ride. And that's how the elevator operator came to be. And now we all mostly ride elevators without being afraid, but...
I have one thought, just one thought. One thought. Oh, sounds weird. Every art epoch through history has been the norm, and then the rebellion against the norm to become the new, because it is hot and it's making it and it is, wow, that's fresh. And we all look for what's next. Music, art, the same. All of those things, I believe, AI, man, I love that comment that Seth said. It was like, we don't know what they're going to think when it is sentient, it truly, and is like, what is me? All those type of things are amazing to think about, but especially creative people will always rail against the norm and what is, and they will look for and perform the new and the amazing, no matter what that happens to be. We're in a massive homogenization right now, music-wise, art-wise. There's so much, and you can see it all. There will be something new that will happen, and it will be creative people who do it. And it will change the world and how we think about art and music and culture.
And I'll tell you one way to know if it's made by humans. Come to a place like Celebration of Fine Art, where you can watch the work being created right in front of your eyes and meet the artist. So,
Susan, I just wanted to point out this is a fascinating piece, kind of pertains to this discussion here tonight. And you know, to Todd's point first, I always say, going back to the classic line that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I think at the end of the day, it's not necessarily a competition between AI and human being. It's more like a festival that we're involved in. And I think together, we're just going to see glorious things. But this particular piece here on the screen, if you can all see it, my godfather was a brilliant artist who had studied with Diego Rivera in the 30s in the WPA in San Francisco, and had painted the first half of his life, and then did this inlaid wooden relief format that you see here. And we have kind of a family legacy gallery that exhibits my godfather and my father and myself. But this piece here was called Computer Date, and this was done in the late 70s. And my daughter met her husband on the computer, as I'm sure like half the people alive today are. And so to have that kind of presaging of the world to come, I think is kind of what the artists have been doing that dance for thousands of years, to try to open the doors to these voices that tell us about the innate reality that we all share here. But there's a couple more of his pieces here. This was like a World War II homage that he had done. That was an Adam and Eve. And then, in fact, my father had done some early painting like this and went on to do a lot of this Giacometti-like sculpture. And there's a portrait I did of my father. But so they're going to the point of, the more range of styles that we've been immersed in, how that's enabled to, bring so many of us into our own voice and aesthetic. And just real quickly, there's a couple of shots of the studio that I mentioned there too. That's our studio gallery back in Connecticut. There was the Borglum studio. Here he is working on location in there, 1915, on a clay piece that went on to bronze in University of Virginia. And that's a clay that went over to Chicago bronze as well.
wow. Thank you. Those are great. And I think I'm going to go back to Todd's commentary about tools. Tools have existed since the beginning of time to create things, and we just evolve and use what's available. And art has been a part of communication since the beginning of time, and will continue in various forms. And I love that part of what's so great here is you see so many different mediums that you would never think about, like Britt Hansen painting layers of colors and then carving down to the color she wants for her reverse painting. I mean, I love that. It's brilliant. So I think we're surrounded by brilliance, and the more we stay curious and stay interested in that connection to humanity, I think we will continue to evolve into wonderful things. And I think art's here to stay. And yes, I do think, the computers have access to infinite information. We can only access so much. Although I do think we underestimate our abilities by and large as humans. We're the finest computer created, I think, but we don't always categorize all the different information.
I'm so inspired by being here and listening to all these comments, and I just want to share a little 1-minute thing. One of my favorite quotes is, in order to be a great scientist, you need to understand the art of science. And in order to be a great artist, you need to understand the science of art. And so as we contemplate the role that AI will play, it will never surpass the compassion and empathy and human heart. Now, tomorrow I head to Chicago because for my job, I work in AI and I'm going to the Salesforce conference. And I have the greatest appreciation for all that has been shared here today and the triumph that we'll have as we move into the future. And we use the tools of science, but we keep the heart of humanity. And thank you all.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end. Beautiful. Thank you so much. And share with the AI community that the art here is filled with heart and soul. So, yes. Thank you.
I'll say one thing. AI doesn't have a Susan Lee Poitier behind her to carry her into the hemisphere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Seth. Go back and see all of his work. Thank you, Stuart. Opposite sides of the tent, so you have to get your steps in to see them both and look for videos online. And thank you all for being here. Thank you so much again.